I've been in real estate for over 20 years, and there was a period that we were focusing a lot on retail, where it was physical retail was booming across Europe. We've done a lot of site visits with Chris and Bill, and now we are facing a new challenge, and here we are.
Gerard.
Yes. Yes. I'm running a tiny little consultancy firm called PiuVerde. Forget about the name, but up to summer 21, I was with IKEA running a shopping center business for 6 years. Before that, CEO of Oreo, purchased by IKEA in 2015. Been in the business for 35 years or more. I've been followed no bill out of the ICC nations, the entire UI, I've been closer. And been around in the network for quite a long time.
Thanks, Gerard. Herculano.
See if this actually works. Right. Yes. My name is Herculano Rodrigues. I work for a business called Phygital, which is the artist formerly known as the Home Group, which is the online retailer. Been here for 2.5 years. Before that, I spent 10 years working at data analytics firms, including CACI and Javelin Group in physical retail. So effectively, I moved from what was physical retail to what is known as the dark side of retail, so online only. And I joined the business which was going through rapid growth over the last 2 years, particularly the space that I'm in. DHG, for those of you that don't know us, we're an online-only retailer, $3 billion of GMV, 3 categories that we double down in. We do nutrition, beauty, and also have some fashion as well. But we also have a tech business division, and I work in the tech business side. What I will say though, as a tech business, you'll see I have the same outfit that I have this picture over there, which is all of a tech sort of uniform, which is definitely no collars.
Thanks, Herculano. And my name is Igwe. I'm based in Paris in France. It's actually cool. You're from Greece, Eri. Well, based anyway, but you're also from Greece. Gerard from the Netherlands. Herculano from the UK. And I'm based in Paris, for those who are interested.
Well, Herculano is really from South Africa.
Very different countries and different locations. So we want to give you a different, and I hope broader and more interesting perspective. What I'm involved in is primarily advising retailers and brands on their international strategy and growth. And of course, the last few years, renegotiating with landlords across different markets and also getting tenants and brands out of markets, which are just as complicated. I do have some landlord friends, I'm pleased to say, because the ICSC and ULI community, which I'm part of, have helped me relate to landlords. Setting the scene, so we get a perspective of the direction we're going to go into, is essentially asking or answering, if we can, one of the questions, which is, how do you reimagine retail? So Lara's put a good perspective, the consumer, customer, that experience. We have to bring it back, from our point of view in this panel anyway, to the physical retail. What does that really look like today and in the future? And so hopefully we're going to ask what reimagined retail looks like, at least for the panelists, and hopefully you answer the same questions for yourselves. Does ROI, do yields, do values, valuation really matter? Because when you talk about how you assess the experience, and Gerard is definitely going to talk about it because of our visits to the Hammerson Levat Centre, one of the big questions that kept coming up is, okay, this customer experience interaction and everything else, aside from the IKEA store specifically, how do you convert that into a number or numbers? How do you know it's a profitable project? What does data really mean, and how important is data? And the area, of course, is very much involved in that, for sure, in the research, but Gerard over the years, and Herculano in terms of digital. So does digital matter? Does data matter? And if so, to what extent? What does it tell us? And how can we use it productively? And of course, Lara set it up very nicely, AI. We're definitely going to get into the AI conversation. Because I certainly want to know more about AI, fear or foe. But then, kind of back to school, as it were, Phygital. And you may find it surprising that the number of people I run across in our industry who do not understand the word Phygital. I'm not saying I do, but I'm saying it can be different things to different people. So what is Phygital retail? We are not necessarily going to get into it on this conversation, but it's the blend or the blur between physical and digital. How does that come together, and what is the result of that as we experience it? How do you create the digital experience? What is best in class when you look at some of the great brands? For me, the digital experience, for example, Zara on the Champs-Élysées, which they've just opened, there's a huge digital experiential wall as you walk, well, I don't think because you can't, into the female changing rooms. You can't walk in there as a man, but on the wall as you go along, there's this huge meandering concept of immersive entertainment, immersive experience, immersive whatever. And the question that comes up, and we've debated it on social media, is how do you convert that visual into a sale? How do you monetize it? Is it due to be monetized or not? So I'm just throwing out some thoughts and questions. Technology, of course, how does that play a role? And immersive experiences. How do the immersive experiences in general convert into retail sales? And how can you measure those? So those are some of the things we're going to be getting into. And I'd like to start off with Eri, because in preparing this panel session, she came up with a few very alarming numbers, I'll be honest. You're a researcher, so you do come up with alarming numbers. I've known you long enough to know that you kind of blow the mind and you say, okay, figure that out. So, in the UK, the void areas, for example, retail void areas, is a mind-blowing number today, and it's even more by the end of the century. What is that? And is that something we should be worried about, or is that an opportunity for us?
Well, the reimagining retail concept is something that we introduced already in 2019. We could see this void building up. Talking about data, unfortunately, we have limited amount of data for most markets. UK is a market that there is data, and in research we quantified back in 2019 already to about 140 million square feet, and with an estimate that this is to double by the end of the decade. Of course it is alarming, but we need to look at it with a positive eye and look into the opportunity. And the opportunity is that some of it has to be reimagined, and some of this should be repurposed. And all for the benefit of the existing retail and the synergies that can create with other businesses.
And so how would that, I'm going to pass this to Gerard, if I'll leave you to breathe for a moment. I'll come back to you. So how can we take this 140 odd million square feet, and in your experience, reimagine, repurpose it to become something, maybe we don't know what it's going to look like. We can touch on food and beverage, for example. We know that's a big player, but there are risks attached to that. How would you, and the other percentage we didn't really figure out is kind of 80% in this room, from Bill's question. What are the other 80% of you? Are you consultants, advisors, belly dancers? Both consultants and advisors. Okay. So this could be a great opportunity for you to know that there is a lot of retail space out there that doesn't seem to have found a home. So Gerard, what would be your thoughts about that space that's void today?
Yeah, there is no straightforward answer to this, I think. The obvious one is that you can clearly see a sort of global trend trending towards food and beverage. Why? Because it increases dwell time, it enhances the feeling of people needing each other. Looking at this, we took a few bets. One is, and that's important, is that people still like to meet each other. I don't know about you, but how were you happier during COVID or before or after? During COVID, meeting your colleagues and your friends was screen only, or is it something when I come here and I give Lara a big hug, that it's something different than just meeting her on the screen? And I think that is crucial for your belief in how you're going to organize your space. Then, how that will be applied, I think we will see changes more rapidly. It will be less predictable. You can see the big trends, so you know where you're going to end up maybe in some sectors. But when and how is super difficult to think right now. So the biggest assignment is for owners, landlords, is to create flexibility. Flexibility in your relationship with your tenant, your retail set up a joint venture, which we every now and then do. And then, but also in the terms of the lease, so keep your leases short. You know, there used to be a time when we thought long-term leases, nice spreadsheet, and then we know what we are. Well, I think control is an illusion. That's out of the window. So you need to be on the tip of your toes all the time. And I'm not knowledgeable on what a Phygital is. I want to be knowledgeable on what my customer is. And then, of course, data comes in as a crucial element.
Yeah, let's come on to Herculano. So flexibility is definitely one of them. Shorter leases or more flexible is another aspect. Obviously, from a digital perspective, Herculano, and as I said to you earlier on, to use Bill Kistler's definition of you're on the dark side. Quite frankly, I thought landlords were the dark side, Bill, but there you go. You're on the dark side. So if you're on the dark side, and we know that roughly 75% of retail is still physical, what are you doing on the dark side?
I wanted to really just get a sense of what e-commerce is all about. And actually, e-commerce is far more difficult than people imagine. It's much easier to get product at the back of a retail square, like a store, than it is at the front of the customer store. It's really complicated to get e-commerce to work, and it actually eats into retailers' margins. And I think John mentioned the point around retailers are struggling for profitability. A lot of retailers are struggling for profitability because they over-invested or overthought what their capabilities could be from a technology point of view. This isn't going to answer your question, but this might be interesting to get through. So, I think the reality of it is, the retailers that are going to be successful in the future are the ones that are going to have data, and it's going to be the same for landlords. In our world, as a online-only retailer, we can track you pretty much from the moment you enter the site through to when you leave. And we understand how many times you've clicked on it, we can see what you've looked at, we can see, we'll actually analyze specifically how much pages you view, which pages you click at, and what we'll start to do is use that data to make more effective decisions on how we merchandise the front of the store, which is the online business. Physical retail is not in that place to be able to be that flexible, that agile at this point in time.
And so how do you see, or when do you see that crossover? Lara was talking about, that there's a point where you do keep doing the same things, but eventually you're going to get to a point where there is, for a better description, of conversions, so that online digital data can be used in the store. And I guess the question would be, what are you doing as a company or as an industry to support that transition that physical retail is struggling with?
To be completely honest, I think what we're trying to do as our business is we're trying to help retailers readjust how they invest in technology, so they invest in the right technology to be able to actually make it more profitable. Because e-commerce, back to my point, is quite challenging. I actually think the good news about digital is that there is over 9,000 brands that launch every month across the world. Most of them are digital. THG, we launched 76 new businesses in 2016, which was 76 new international websites across the world in 76 different territories. We were only able to do that because we had digital. We were not able to do that massive expansion unless you had large franchise partners. We owned all of those stores in all of those countries. We closed some that didn't work and we kept the ones that open. I actually think the number of brands that are coming through now, what landlords will need to think about is how can you get closer to that data where the consumer is, whether that be TikTok, whether that be the metaverse, whether that be Facebook. How can you start to understand which of these brands are coming through? And then to Gerard's point is create a flexible model to invest in the ones that you think are going to work. There's not going to be a lack of brands in 10 years. It's about how do these brands work in the space that you have left after some of it is having to be repurposed.
So is there a point, area, for example, where you can take that digital, because one thing we do know is that more and more online players are looking at physical stores anyway. Some are not succeeding, some major ones we know are closing, but what do you think what are your experiences for a start in terms of that online, offline? Numbers, are they increasing? To Herculano's point, more and more brands being created. You've seen something of a tangible roadmap there?
Well, I think, as you said, like how will these online brands access their customers? Some choose to go offline, some choose to go to high street and open this store that creates the connection with the customer other more direct way to convey their message about their philosophy, etc. So that's something that some online brands are choosing. But for the customer, what we saw clearly, the e-commerce numbers, the penetration is rising. We are at a point now globally of around 1/5 of the sales happening digitally, and the projection is at least 1/4 will be happening digitally in the next 2-3 years.
Are those global figures, or I guess are those global figures?
These are global figures.
Certain markets might be more deeper penetration.
Yeah, the case already was 20% and 25% already pre-pandemic. Clearly, these are global figures, and clearly they are hiding a lot of variations. There are still many European markets that are below the 10% threshold, and this is growing. So this threat, in a way, will come later in some of the markets. But at the same time, whilst like in 2021, e-commerce penetration increased by 30% last year, it slowed down. It increased by 5% globally. So it's a natural thing we just said. People are returning to shops. People go back to the high streets. And one of the elements that I think that has been missing from this discussion is we talk about the brand, we talk about the shop. I would step outside the shop for a moment. And I would sit, in the middle of the city or in the middle of the shopping center. And I would consider what's happening before even I go into the shop. And what do I experience when I go to the city center, local high street. So there is a bigger kind of theme and discussion here on what is the journey of the consumer, the physical journey of the consumer within a place, and how this can help retail. And what comes here is this mix of uses. Is the flexibility, is the hybrid space, but it is the mix of uses. It is bringing closer living, working, the health, the clinics, the civic space. You need to study what your community needs and what will enhance these interlinked journeys and create and increase the footfall. Because I think the conversion will come from footfall. You need first to have the footfall, and then you will have the conversion when you step in the store, when whatever happens in the store.
And that's obviously a really good point. You want to make a... Yeah, go ahead.
I totally agree, and I think where we as e-commerce retailers, what we focus on is total lifetime value. And if we think of conversion being not the first time that they come, but maybe the third or fourth or fifth time they come, that still counts as total lifetime value. And if there was more flexibility in how you create total lifetime value, which is an online or offline purchase, there's a lot of the online purchase that you talk about, the 20%, half of that is click and collect. If you discount the grocery store. So a lot of it is being collected through a distribution center called retail store.
I'm glad it comes from you.
The question, and I think this is the difference which we see, is that focus and obsession on customer lifetime value. Trying to focus on that more than just the total number of conversions that can convert this once. It's more about trying to build a relationship with the consumer.
If I can bring two aspects in there and ask you, Gerard. One is, and I think you're talking equally, Gary, about the municipality. So working with the local authorities, urban planning, how should that be evolving, including transportation, of course, as well as bike paths and goodness knows what else. Gerard, from your point of view, from a mixed-use project, which you're very familiar with, how do you bring that all together for it to be successful? And what are the pitfalls that you have experienced over your expansive career, although mixed use is a newer concept compared to the 30, 40 years of your experience? How does that all come together? The planning, the urban, the city centre, and of course the consumer at the heart of all this.
So one thing first, there is no dark side.
The dark side?
No, it doesn't exist, at least not in the eye of the customer. And that's the only one that matters to me. Especially the younger generation. Anyone, so I think this year is 25 years of Google. 1998, I think it was founded. Anyone under the age of 30 electricity out of the stockade. You know, it's like it's always been there. For them, they only live in one world, and whenever we want to make a distinction online, offline, however we communicate, they don't make that distinction. They're on both all the time. And so there is no dark side to that. But the digital realm can help collect data and getting to know things, which is super. Then coming back to this flexibility and mixed use, it's a broad term, and everybody will have a different image of when we talk mixed use. The mixed use so far that's been built is not really mixed. It's single use, stable. But if you go into an office, you still go to the office, you go to work there, you can't get a coffee as someone walking by. So it's not really mixed use. And I think we need, its flexibility needs to get adapted to the fact that we need to get more blur, more omni-use. So what today is an office, next week can be a shop or a cafe.
Let me challenge you on that, so, if I may. So you're saying mixed use as a name is misunderstood. So what would mixed use to you be then, so that we can all be equally educated on this subject?
Yeah, mixed use to me would be that we really mix. So if I regenerate my office and I make a fantastic cafe for my co-workers, why can't I open it to the public so that they get to know my company? So this kind of mixed use, these kind of thoughts, and the flexibility is far more between our ears than in the building. The difficulty, of course, is that we're coping with a municipality, a government, with an administration that is used to strict zoning plans. And I think that is a long battle to fight. Someday it has to get in. To add to that, I think the same younger generation that is growing up and getting into high spenders has a totally different mentality to consumption. Here's the irony. In the shopping center world, we've been thriving on overconsumption. And this is exactly what's killed the planet for the larger part of it. So we need to get to our senses and learn how to deal with it. So you see more and more retailers that go into circularity, that take things back. You see more and more of the younger generation that buy second-hand only. We had a nice discussion on recalls earlier today, and it's still a niche, but that niche is growing rapidly at a much higher pace than traditional consumption.
I'm still intrigued by, we must have a further conversation around the mixed use. I'd like to explore that even further with you. I suspect a webinar coming up. Eri, just to come back to you on one of the other, if we come back to physical retail and the luxury brands and prime space, prime retail, which we know overall globally is performing well. So luxury brands trading well, trading even better, physical locations being good. What is the element that actually creates this attraction or attractiveness of the luxury brands to the consumer, which, for want of a better description, other forms of retail can use and learn, because they already have a captive audience, the luxury brands. They generally have a very strong consumer base. So what is it they're doing different that puts them in this new category?
I guess it's that they are so focused. They understand they study, they understand their consumer, and I don't know, maybe because it's a more niche group, it's a little bit easier for them to admit to it, because when you have a big city center or shopping center, then you have mixed demographics and you need to solve a much more complex equation. So I guess that's what they do well. They understand well their consumer, and basically they're focusing a lot on offering this experience, and that comes from, as I was saying before, from within the store. They're going for bigger spaces. They're introducing other, complementary experiences. They showcase the whole range. They add spas, restaurants, beauty. They add many aspects to make the consumer feel good. And also they choose these locations across the world that have connects with quite a variety of users around. In city centers, they have either other retailers around them, a vibrant retail mix. They are most of the times iconic architecture. They are pedestrian-friendly areas. They have all these ingredients that are welcoming for a visitor and to have a complete experience outside the store and within the store.
And so is there a way, Gerard, in which that digital knowledge or the knowledge through technology of the consumer in the luxury brand space, is there a way in which you leverage that with your luxury offer, for example, those who kind of use you for that particular, or can you look at different platforms as well? I mean, how can you basically take that information knowledge on the consumer, not only you, because I had a client that was in the luxury brand space, and they were looking to get a new consumer that wasn't already part of their base. And it was very expensive and very complex to do. Is there a way in which it can be done more fruitfully today?
I think audience tracking, what's going on, audience targeting is a little bit easier online than it is offline if you're trying to sell audiences. But when we think about commerce, you think about it in 3 C's, right? It's content, it's convenience, and it's community. From a content perspective, if I'm a luxury retailer, if I'm Nike, it's how do I generate enough content in the store, whether that be the merchandise or the experience. And for us online, it's about generating content that people are going to click on. That's literally what we have to do. So we have to generate content that people want to engage with. And I feel that's the same thing that people need to do in retail for some categories. We don't engage that much with food-based. Other categories you probably do. From a convenience point of view, it's how can you make it seamless, whether this in-store experience of get it out quick and easy, or from an online retail perspective is one click checkout, or how can we've done some analysis. We have a midnight cutoff for next day delivery, and we find that 30% of our shoppers shop between 8 and 10 p.m. So if we don't have that cutoff, we actually have to strictly to sell. So how can we make it as convenient as possible? And from a community point of view, whether you're online or offline, people want to connect. We've discussed this already. How do you build that community and leverage that community to drive repeat purchase, but repeat content generation as well? And I think it doesn't just have to be a super luxury brand that can take those 3 C's. Any brand that is in the space of engaging with the consumers should be focused on that.
Again, Herculano take the online retailers that wanted to achieve this community. They have to go physical. They have to open the shop and bring the people in and to try things or to have a coffee in the store. That's where community happens in the real world.
Yes and no. We have an online magazine, and we have 50 contributors every month, and they are from our community, and they are contributing. Loyalty program, the best loyalty program besides Amazon Prime, also used in the US. Over 90% of their sales comes from customers that are in their loyalty program. And in that loyalty program, they'll be giving content, they'll be going online, they'll be into store, and they'll be purchasing. So I don't think of community as just a physical manifestation. Unfortunately, it might be something that you put over your face and then you're going to be in a community space eventually. Which is one word.
I would agree to that. Community, we often tend to think about community as a geographically contained community. I think there are much more communities. You have a community of Chelsea fans, you have a community of line dancing favorites and whatever. You know, there's thousands of communities out there, people that connect through certain passion, not only because they choose to live in a certain area. So that's.
I would agree, and you also see it on social media. Instagram being a big one, TikTok being another, and TikTok's a bit more difficult to connect with because you can't directly access people through email addresses. But Instagram, you can, and you create that community, that environment around what you do and who you are. So you're absolutely right. You can create online, which is something for us to think about as well because we're so focused on the physical. And yet, you mentioned Nike, for example. Nike do, and indeed Adidas, have this community of runners, and there's a whole community. And to me, it seems as though Adidas has a stronger community online than Nike does. I don't have data on that, but I just see through social media platforms and what's happening. So it's kind of interesting that it doesn't have to be physical in doing that. We're going to move into some, just get your questions ready. So about 5 minutes or so, I'm going to open it up for some questions from from anybody. I do want to touch on one of those topics which is quite complex, especially for retailers and brands, which is ESG in general, and the Sustainable Development Goals, 17 or so by 2030, I think it is. So, who better to take us through that than Gerard, because some of my clients and brands are basically, I mean, they don't say it overtly, so don't get me wrong, and obviously I've never named them, but they just feel, you said something interesting about cost versus, I can't remember quite the phrase now, but it's almost like they're saying this is way too expensive for me to do, because I'm looking at the next year, I'm looking at the short term, let alone medium or long term. How can I get into assessing the Sustainable Development Goals as a key strategic objective and manage my business? Gerard, walk us through that. What are the opportunities?
So one thing, I take this idea as an example because that's my best reference. One is they took a very bold approach, saying that by 2030 the company is going to be climate neutral, scope 1, 2, and 3. We don't know what that means. So this is a very bold statement because they don't have the solutions on the shelf. It's it's like building wings while you're jumping out of it. And the reason behind that is because they're truly convinced that we're breaking down the planet. We need to do something to fix it. So what you see is many and many initiatives to help doing that. So this is one thing on the E component of ESG. On the social component, this is where the big win is for what we then call meeting places, to engage with the community, to engage with the municipality, and to, if you go back 10, 15 years, I would bet that at least 50% of all the retailers had no engagement whatsoever with the community. Nothing whatsoever. They were just taking from the community. And stores look at best from a customer service point as nicely decorated storage. So this is where we're coming from. And I think it's time that we change our mindset and not only think about the bottom line financial result, but think about the impact that we have both on the environment and on the community. So it's a huge opportunity for shopping center owners to create a sense of social cohesion, bring people together, which you then both can benefit from. I think that's a massive challenge. We need to take that on.
And if we, and you may be wondering, well, why, how does ESG figure into reimagining retail? And it's part of the process. We hear about it. We talk about the metaverse that you'd have heard before. Some of you may have heard of the metaverse, but have got no idea what it is. Probably don't care either. But the metaverse is here, whether we like it or not. Digital twins, NFTs, they're all here. We're just not, we haven't got our head in that space yet. And what I'm seeing in our retail real estate industry, except those who are maybe institutionally minded, it's not part of our vocabulary yet, so we haven't taken it on board. But the train is on the tracks and we need to figure it out. So it is part of the reimagining process of retail. What does the future look like? And how can we engage with that as well? Before I open it up, just want to ask you the question, Herculano. So the ESG factor, how are you addressing that in the digital space that you're in?
It's actually it's something that it's quite hard to say this without trying to sound totally greenwashing, which is what often happens when people talk about ESG. But it is generally something that's very important. We actually have a whole business unit that is actually built around eco. We built a number of products that we believe are helping our consumers focus more on ESG. One of the ones that we've done is we've opened up what we call eco delivery. So a consumer has a choice to order online, one of our stores, for an eco delivery. So it comes in a bag, it comes in a recycled product, recycled packaging, and actually we've seen a huge increase in consumers who are willing to press the button to pay that extra 50p just to get that product at that time. We actually acquired, a recycling business, and what we actually then did was for our beauty business, we actually offered all our customers on the beauty space the opportunity to send their products back for recycling. We'd actually take those bottles and physically do the recycling of them as well. So it is able to do this when you're an e-commerce retailer and you're shipping stuff in probably the least economical way. But it's trying to do our bit, and I think it's investing in products and in people and processes to improve its use.
Yeah, because you guys are between a rock and a hard place in a sense. We talk about obviously the Amazon buying and any other platform that we use, and the transportation, the boxing, the throwing, all that whole process. And so there's kind of a view that you guys are part of the problem as opposed to being part of the solution as well, which I hope is the case. Questions? Anybody have a question? Just hold on a second, Mike is coming to you.
Hi. You talked earlier about wanting to encouraging retailers to invest in the right tech. What is that tech? And crucially, is it affordable for small and ambitious businesses?
There isn't a single right tech, a group of retailers. I think it is quite specific, depending on that retailer's journey from a digital transformation or whatever you want to call it. More mature retailers, the tech might be metaverse. Some other retailers, they actually just need to know where their stock is. They just need some technology to know where their stock is along this supply chain, so they can accurately tell where the stock is, so they can reduce wastage, which often happens in the workforce supply chain. I genuinely don't think tech is the issue. I think the issue is not knowing the issue, and people just don't buy tech because it's the most shiny thing to try to invest in.
Interestingly, I think some of the issue is not necessarily not knowing what the problem is, but it's being able to find the right tech. So we're going through research at the moment trying to find the right tech, and it's very difficult to navigate where to put the investment in order to have the right tech.
Because the longer you take to do that process, the more out of date the tech is you're going to come in. Right? Because you're going to be spending 2 years trying to figure out how to define the problem, learn RFP, and then by the time you get the stock, like the tech in, it's outdated. But the challenge is trying to not, I say this before, humble, trying to overcook it, start small and then grow from there.
So in a sense, you can layer the tech on if you get the right tech at the beginning in terms of what you want to do on your journey. Is that correct?
Make sure you just invest in some flexible technology. Just like SAP.
Any other questions? There.
Hi,
Yes, please.
Hi. I might be shot down because I haven't been listening. But I haven't heard anyone mention leisure as part of retail so far. And I know it's a very old adage, but I really believe it's true that a lot of retail is about the leisure experience. And as an example, yesterday I went to see an artist there to have a chat and a glass of wine. I ended up buying his most expensive painting by the time I was there. And I felt good. That's all I can say. I felt good about the transaction. The same way with a lot of things I do, whether it's online or whether it's physical, I often feel quite good about it, even if I just press buttons and I send off a fly fishing kit. I feel like I've got an association. With one of the firms, they actually send me a handwritten card back saying, "Thank you, Derek, for your purchase." It makes me feel $1 million. So, retail is leisure. Is that still the place?
Yeah, I was going to end with that. So you've jumped the gun, but that's great, Derek. I just wanted to open up questions so I could see what people think, and then I was going to close with a couple of things. But it is a good point, and I do want to ask the question. So it's not directed at anybody in particular, but leisure is a very important part, as Derek says, of any project. Leisure operators are becoming bolder in terms of what they offer, what landlords are able to integrate. One specifically that I wanted to touch on, because I had the experience yesterday on Father's Day from my children who were here in London, was experiencing Lunchjack, which is by Westfield, and it's mini golf for anybody who hasn't done it. And it was competitive socializing, which I had a quick conversation with Lara about as well, and there's a whole mind process around competitive socializing, which is interesting. So, but one of the big questions that comes up, and anybody can take this, but maybe starting off with you, Gerard, just in terms of the integration of it into physical spaces, is we've seen over the years that leisure operators have not been as successful as they could be, and because they're big monsters they create in general. Some are smaller, don't get me wrong. But how do you then, your point about flexibility, how do you move them out and create something else? Maybe talk about how you see the leisure in general, and maybe from a landlord's perspective, what needs to be included for flexibility.
Well, I think leisure is a very broad topic. So I wouldn't advocate to put an amusement park next to every shopping center. It doesn't work for me. But I think leisure starts with the small things, from a little fountain where kids play, to, I think that if you have a nice food court with various restaurants, it already adds another curve on the food court performance if you add live music to it. So you allow both individual pubs or center stage for people to perform, whether that is whether it's a play or it's music, live music. I think it adds another curve on the food court performance. So these kind of things you should start implementing, and then discovering and looking carefully at your data. What is the next step? What can be the next offer?
Thank you. Anybody else want to offer it? Harry?
Well, kind of the cruel reality as well about leisure is that it can afford to pay probably less than retail. So that means it's about also the landlord's expectations on the income for the space that is left for leisure. Because leisure can come and be part of reimagining retail, of repurposing retail, complementing retail. Clearly they have their synergies, but then it's about also the actual, how much you pay for this space.
Maybe mix it into the flexibility thought. So why don't we have space that we use during the day as a retail store that turns into a leisure component after 6 o'clock? So you have not more square meters, but you have more opening hours.
Okay. Mr. Kessler?
Can I just jump in on this leisure question? Because I think it's one of my pet peeves that we have all these neat silos and sectors in our industry. And in reality, some of you know I'm also a recovering Disney guy. And Disney is the mother of all retail experiences. We think it's an amusement park, but it's really a shopping experience. And great retail is leisure. And we talk about experience. So there's a fusion going on, it has been going on for decades. We need to recognize that what's really needed today is the kind of experience, shopping experience, that feels like leisure, that's fun, that's memorable, and all those good things. So, I just think that this art of, it's not entirely artificial because they are different business models, but we need to recognize that as a sector, retailers can learn a hell of a lot from leisure providers, and that when they combine those learnings, they can create a better retail experience.
Brilliant input. I agree. A couple more questions.
Hold the microphone.
Oh, sorry, okay.
It's specifically for you, Herculano, if you don't mind. It was regarding click tracking. 3 sub-questions, effectively. Is tailored selling online effective? Is it the most effective way of selling via the internet? Also, does everyone like that? And are there any ethical issues involved? I do find it very odd that I can search something on a different website and go onto another website and it's suggested to me. Whilst probably the correct way of addressing it, because it is actually quite convenient. It's nice to have things recommended, but sometimes it's almost too much, and I'm getting told what to buy myself. So is it effective? Do you have the numbers? Do you see that people do repeat customers if it's put in front of them? And also, is there any ethical issues related with putting products in front of people?
So firstly, the lowest return on ad spend is on ad advertising channels. So when you go from one website to another, the lowest return on spend is on ad channels. So it's very, very incremental. We don't consider that as personalization. We genuinely see increased good news is, personally, I think there'll be total decline in ads, and then you won't see that anymore as an effective channel because people don't actually click on that as another link to buy. But how you as a consumer start to choose which brands you share your data with, what you get in return for that. And we've seen that in our nutrition business. We've got a huge database of, over 1 million customers in the UK. We can understand from that database who is a brand on that needs, who is a doing goer, who needs a big sum of protein advertised in an email, and who needs probably an energy drink as part of the market. And that's where we see more effectiveness as well. And we're seeing this from other brands. So Wonderlist, which own top or owned by other brands, they've also seen a huge increase in personalised media spend, seeing huge returns on that. So I do think that will be less of that cookie tracking and more of actually effective.
Okay. Chris, digital. It's a god-awful thing. It's not a portmanteau. It's a shirt. You've got out yourself. Now, and I think it's not very helpful for the debate because it sort of speaks to redundant channels. When everybody thinks about channels, they think about selling shit. And actually, Herculano, not surprisingly, talk about customer acquisition and whole customer acquisition and community of brand. I think that is the future for our market retail. One thing I haven't noticed about the which is unusual, is, you nearly touched on it just then, is the role of store as media. The value of presence in place. So I might have a few words from the panel on that, please.
Yes, Lara, you did raise the retail media. Who wants to take that as the physical store itself being part of your media face, and how you obviously convert that eventually, I guess, into dollars or pounds, either in store or outside?
I can take it from a retail start with just for retail media networks, which is retail media network is the fastest growing digital ad spend channel in the US and in Europe very soon. And what retailers are doing is actually selling their digital advertising to brands and advertising everywhere. And one of the things that we started to see is actually the physical manifestation of that is in grocery stores in the US and in grocery stores, you actually can walk past the banner or you walk past the shelf and you can be advertised on that shelf with their digital ad from another brand that's not even on that shelf. And what we're seeing is more and more increase in that sort of taking that customer data and just trying to advertise everywhere. I find it a bit intrusive, but actually, Laura's probably going to talk a little bit further about it, but I do think that retail media could be a really good channel to get customer acquisition. I'm not talking about the sort of physical experience and going to stores and that customer acquisition, but just using retail media networks, which is basically just new distribution points for your brand outside of search and social, is something that we see increasing. Don't know if Laura's going to...
Yeah, she's primed already.
No, it's a really important part of the conversation. I think if you're looking at, let's use a framework we know and love, the shop and shop, right? So when you're either duty-free retail, travel retail, or whether or not you're a shopping mall, or you're a department store, when you're selling off the space that actually becomes your physical footprint. So I'm Valentino, I'm putting that god-awful pink terrazzo beauty concept all over the place. Whether or not I get a screen or not is now media content play. Because if I want to curate this space so that the messages are curated and everything's curated, now I have an opportunity to monetize, right? So any screen, any surface to which I can play media, that now becomes a part of the sale. So now there's a responsibility. So you asked a question about knowing the right technology, also knowing the right deal to make. Because if you don't have an operational model that allows you to create content or allows you to pay for advertising content, then suddenly you're in a situation where you can't actually back end that deal. And this has been something that's happening. It has been happening in retail centers for ages, where people want to put ads up in retail centers, but they only have one ad. And then if a retail center can't find somebody to buy out that follows, it becomes brand tired and there's nothing else, they just keep the same ad up. It actually works against the brand. There's so much going into this space right now, but right now it's the tax of the screen that goes into the space that they are trying to curate, and the brands, beauty brands are going to be a big target for this in terms of Igwe or Sephora, where you're able to have tutorials or being able to do sell-throughs or sell-with. Those types of spaces are going to be where you see the majority, and grocery is.
Thank you. Thanks, Mark. Great to see you again. Wasn't there another question over here, Bill? Bill. Question over here first.
Hi, all. Paul Kaywood's here about me. We run around in Poland with shopping centres. I was just going to, a little reminder, it's not just E, it's S and G as well. And I think the retail world has got a lot better at the social and governance side in terms of physical retailing. I would question a lot of the practices within the digital sector, especially social media. So I think there's perhaps a catch-up. My question really, apart from the same as Mark about the terrible word that is an absolute bastard with a B, which I'm not even going to say, but linking physical and digital like that, so we have to have a little recount on that one. The halo effect, CACI did a wonderful piece of research in 2019, which obviously all fell by the wayside over the COVID period. But post-pandemic, and as Lara touched on with the speeding up integration within the retail businesses, has that experience changed, improved? Is it moving forward? How important is everybody, how much importance is everybody giving to that particular phenomenon?
Gary, I probably haven't mentioned this already. We started to distribute in stores, and we've also got physical pop-ups open every now and then. They're fantastic. Had a store in the Arndale Centre, and it got a huge amount of traffic. We had brands doing lots of discussions about the brand, tutorials, and all of those stuff. And we did see a bump in sales in that particular, that week in that area, from an online perspective. Will we, as an online retailer, open more stores? We probably wouldn't, but we certainly will do test and learn. And the final thing that we did was whey protein is now sold in boots, and everywhere there's a boot, we see a tiny bump. I think it's early days of being in market now for about 3 weeks. There's still early days in terms of getting the full analysis, but we are seeing that there is a physical increased awareness which drives online sales.
Thank you. One more question. There's a question just behind you, John. Go ahead. Thanks, Chris.
John, you can wait. Dan Park from CACI, thanks Paul for the advertorial there. And I think to loop back around to Mark's comment, part of all of that online halo work that we instigated maybe pre-pandemic, but also through the pandemic as well, included what Mark's talking about, which is the value of eyes-on footfall, walking through spaces and connecting with brands. I think we're getting there, getting to a point where we can start to value that, whether both sides or both parties value it the same as another thing. It's important to point out that it's different by category, by product category, and it's different by market positioning, which I think both Herc and Laura have talked about today as well. My question for the panel, I guess linked to that, is are there any learnings that you're aware of looking to Asia, let's say, who are very definitely 5 years ahead of us, either in general or specifically more towards how they value customer engagement, how they value, they just forget about channel, and how they value eyes-on people in place, as it were.
Well, not to pick on him again, but I'm going to go with Gerard, because Livat do have centres in China and India. What have you been seeing through your relationship there?
The India centres not quite open yet. There are developments, so there's 2 in Delhi, there's 1 in Mumbai. But from a China perspective, I guess this is a different world. This is uncomparable to Europe. One thing, just to give you an example,
opening up a loyalty program in a given shopping center. In Europe, you have to do a massive effort even to get 50% of the retailers joining your platform, your loyalty platform. In China, 98% signs up within 2 days. In China, opening up just a pre-launch in a shopping center, you have in 2 weeks' time, you have 200,000 subscriptions from customers. We're now up to 1 million in 3 months. And that comes all together because it's a combination of things. One is you have a loyalty program. The loyalty program is connected to WeChat. The WeChat is connected to either WeChat Pay or Alipay. So basically, you as a center manager have real-time sales information. If you go in Starbucks and buy a coffee, you can basically see it on the screen. So this is a whole new world of customer data information. And what it helps is that you have a completely different discussion with your tenants. So it's not anymore about what is the market trend. It's more about what is the customer that brings to your front door, and how much conversion do you get out of it, and how do we help you make a better conversion and increase your sales. So that's it. So you're sitting at the same side of the table instead of opposite side of the table. You have a different relationship, and I think that's hugely helpful. There's one big difference with China, is that data privacy rules are quite different there than we have here. So it makes it also a lot easier in China to collect this data and work with it. And it will be a while before we get here to that level.
I'm adding to that. Anthropologically, it's very different. It's not that they're 5 years ahead. They're a completely different society. And if you really want to look at behavior patterns and migration patterns and understanding how people link together, LATAM and Spain are more alike than Spain is to the rest of Europe. You start breaking things down. I could tell you when we're doing prototypical retail, we're running 4 prototypes depending on market. China's its own market, Europe's its own market, LATAM's a market, and US is a market. And with those 4 typologies, we can hit the entire world behavior. But don't think that it's 5 years ahead. It's something that Europe will probably never adopt at that level. And in fact, we tried to adopt digital at that level and failed drastically to the point where literally I'm taking more screens out of spaces than I'm putting them in.
Thanks. I'm going to go to John, and then we're running out of time. I'll take one more question here afterwards, then we'll wrap up. We'll be around for lots of drinks. I think Savills going to be very generous on the booze, so you can ask any questions after that. John?
I mean, part of it was covered just by that point, because I think there isn't the dark side, but there is the blind side. Because I think everything you can trace about a customer online, that's where the oil is for the retailer. They want to understand the acquisition cost, the lifetime of the customer. It still amazes me that we can't get more information from the customers that go into the shopping centres, not just footfall, but where do they go, what other retailers do they shop with, what's their dwell time, how much they spend. The landlords, in a way, should be able to capture that and use that as whether to sell it on to retailers or use it as a way of bringing retailers in. We talked a little bit in Live Out today about the areas you draw people from, the number of the frequency of their return rate, and that technology is starting to develop. But I talk to people like IBM, and they focus on retailers. They don't look at landlords. I'm saying you should actually start looking at what products you can start to landlords. So I don't know if those conversations are being had. But that feels like it is all one, but the customer, we're completely blind to that customer's insurance.
There is also not a cultural element, but we haven't talked about the demographic element as well. So, like different ages shop in different ways. The shopping centers in Singapore did a survey, and like 50% of the people went there, to shop physically, and they were, middle-aged group. 25% went, they shop only online, and the younger ones, and another 25 shopping center. Or and another survey they did is like, what do people go for in the shopping center? Some go to shop, some go to eat, and some go for a walk. So again, like, and this can be broken down and be very relevant to specific age groups. So that's another complexity.
Thanks, Eric. One final question, and then I'll have to wrap it up. Go ahead.
Thank you. Just to draw us back briefly to the ESG discussion. Obviously, we've blown through the 1.5 degrees, or certainly in mainland Europe, we're well through it now. You've mentioned the whole conversation about being on the same side of the table between the retailers and landlords, which I thought was a fantastic sort of analogy there. Yet, previous conversations have been, it's the landlords almost versus the retailers in this space. Do you see a space where the landlords and the retailers could be on the same side of the table as far as ESG is concerned?
I've experienced that phenomenon working for IKEA for 6 years, so which is basically it's a huge advantage if you have a retailer that sees the benefit also in the shopping center that they're operating, where you can, let's say, take on things that maybe not immediately benefit from shopping center, benefit from retailer. So you learn and I think there's no other way than the collaboration between retailers and shopping center owners needs to grow. There's no other way. Both on the economic side of the equation, but also on the environmental side and the S and ESG.
Thanks, Gerard. And I would actually link it to what John said, if I may. I think part of the continued challenge, or let's say opportunity in terms of where we are today, is that there is, depending on the cultures, and again, different conversation, but in France, for example, where I do a lot of my work, although I do international, there's still a them and us cultural mentality between landlords and retailers. And it's very hard to get over that. So until we're actually both sitting on the same side, which I'd like to think that, we all in this room, and those of us who kind of see a vision for the future of retail and the retail real estate industry, we've got to find a way for that conversation to be a dialogue, a discussion. I was at a conference a couple of years ago, to John's point, where on the panel there was a landlord, there was a retailer in the same centre. The landlord was saying, we have this information, this and that, and was going through a lot of detail. And the tenant goes, why don't you share it with us, because we're doing our own as well. So they were doing their thing, the landlord was doing their thing, and they're not having a conversation about how they can share it. And another one, basically the landlord said, why don't you give it to us? And the tenant said, well, if you pay me, I'll give it to you. So we've still got these struggles that we have to work through in some way, shape or form, and ESG is only a part of that, which inevitably is a big conversation. I'd like to thank Eric, Gerard and Herculano, if you give them a round of applause.
As Bill did an advertorial for his organisation at the beginning, I thought I'd say a few words on behalf of Revo. I'm Neil Hockin, I'm the Managing Director of Hudson Mitchell, I'm the Board Director of Revo. What we are, we're a platform for retail, leisure and placemaking industry. If you have any interest in that sector, please join Revo if you're not a member already. This is something we'd like to try and do. I'd like to thank Bill and Michael in particular for doing this, joining us today. I think there's a lot for us all to go and think about, particularly from the property side, about how we try and keep up with the trade way consumers and retailers are interacting with each other, particularly the bit that Dan had looked at in the past in terms of how we levy rent, which I think will have to change over time. I might suggest that's something we discuss over beer rather than in this room, which we thought was that sort of thing. On behalf of urbanOvation and Revo, I'd like to thank Savills, who very kindly sponsored the event and even more kindly provided refreshments afterwards. I'd also like to thank all of our panellists. I think that's been a really, really interesting session today. Special shout out goes to Kaylee at the end, who's pretty much organised most of us on her own, does a fabulous job for Revo. And she'll probably shoot me because it's probably embargo. But just say we will be doing some Revo Awards this year as well. News will come out on that next week in terms of how you apply for that. I'd urge everyone across the industry to look at the many categories we have and how we award the best places for the best retailers and the best detailers, and most importantly for all of our customers to spend their time in. Finally, on a Monday evening when cricket's on and it's nice and sunny outside, I'd like to thank all of you for coming along today, and I hope to see you at future urbanOvation and Revo events.